Hello and welcome to another episode of the Choose Strong podcast. Eddie and I are very delighted to know that you have pushed play today with us. Now, today's episode is about the 200-mile races. We are breaking them down for you today. We are talking about each one, what we loved about them, what the experience was like. We'll go over some of the details of the actual race, the course, what it's like being a crew member, a pacer, and being a part of these races. We'll even break down some of the finances that go in, the time needed. And then, of course, we're going to weave in, as always, some fun stories. And most importantly, we always like to give a little bit of encouragement for you. So there is something for everyone today. And Eddie.
Yes.
Are you ready to dive back into 200s yet? Or should we?
I am so ready.
Yeah. I mean, I know that when I finished at Moab, there was this massive, I almost feel like bag of bricks that was released from your shoulders. You were very happy that we were done with the project.
Yeah, there's some relief for sure. For sure.
I mean, just getting back into a routine.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because you and I have been having some conversations lately about
routine.
Well, just routine. When you go after these big adventures, these goals, I mean, you and I were doing this together.
Yeah.
The 200s was absolutely a team effort in every way. Because whether it was family stuff we were coordinating, but just like the travel and the actual race and the planning. Yeah.
Wait, what? I'm confused. What am I supposed to do?
Folks, he has lost his train of thought. No, I was just saying that you said after these things were done, you were excited to kind of get back into your routine because the 200s definitely consumed certain parts of each month for you. I felt like you're always kind of like fighting back and forth to like, you know, get back into that normal routine that you're used to. I think this is probably the most involved between Choose Strong Project and this.
That I was?
Well, because the races took us away for 5 days.
Oh, yeah.
Each time.
Yeah, 100%. Like I'm a routine guy, and it was nice to be. Yeah, it's nice to be back into routine for sure.
So what have you been doing to get back into your routine? People love the discussion of routines, and you and I operate differently. I'm grateful for your routines because you keep me on track. But what are some of the things that you have been locking back into?
Well, so I have not been exercising, as we've talked about before, on a regular basis. And so I'm on day 4 of your 30-day run and strength program in your app. And
this is the most shocking news of all.
Why is that shocking?
Well, in a way, I'm just like so thrilled because I'm kind of coaching you then, right?
Kind of. Well, it is. Yeah, it is kind of weird going to the gym and setting up my phone to do like an exercise and you are on the video like doing the example and I'm looking down at you.
And all the bros are walking by like, what's that guy doing watching that
double
girl?
Take. Yeah.
And then I come alongside you at the gym and it's like, whoa.
Oh.
There she is.
Coach in the flesh. No, so I haven't been, regular in terms of my exercise, and I'm not, I just don't like to feel gross. That's, that's my.
That's what you feel when you're not exercising.
When I'm not exercising, I just feel gross.
Oh, and, you are never gross to me.
Well, no, I feel like just sitting
down.
It's the
inside, like what you don't like feeling inside.
I guess.
Like the energy level.
Yeah, that's part of it. So, but yeah, in routine, I'm a lot, like I'm weird like that where if I get out of any type of routine, it's just like, I'll start it next week, rather
Monday.
than like.
You love that Monday start day.
I love the Monday. Do it Monday. I'm like, I need a program to, especially coming into, the end of the year and getting in gear. It's going to be, as I'm sure everybody deals with it, like you're going to different things, dinners, and
the holidays,
you're eating whatever, and so I just needed.
Well, we have a big Friendsgiving tomorrow. There's gonna be like 50 people at this thing. I'm super excited about it. Uncle Bob and Aunt Pam, they love to put on these great family parties is the McRae side. And
Yeah.
there's going to be some good food there.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, all that to say is that I'm back in routine and in terms of exercising, which is great. And yeah, I'm using your app, so we'll see. Today is day 4, so I haven't done it yet. But I did look at it, and it said I can be on the bike for like 30 minutes. So I'm looking forward to putting my headphones in and watching the 3rd episode of Beckham.
Yes. So. Listen, for those of you listening that are not familiar with the Sally McRae Strength app, click the link here in the show notes. Go check it out. I have these 2 programs that I created. One, you do not need a gym. You can do these at home. The 30-day program, specifically, that's what you're doing, Eddie, is a wonderful way to ease back in to fitness, but also as a build up to a legit like training program. So I crafted this 30-day program with 3 levels. So there's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And depending on how you feel on the day, you pick the level that you want to do. Now, this is not just for runners and those that have maybe a race in mind. Really, anybody can do this. So if you like to ride the bike or like do the elliptical or the rower, the stair mill, you can absolutely do that as part of the cardio sections in here. And you are not running every single day. So there is rest days, cross training days. You have options in there. But I always suggest doing either this 30-day program or the 6-week program in my app as a way to ease into a new season, as a way to get back in shape maybe after a race, or if you haven't been training for a while, or you're coming back from injury. I do combine strength and mobility routines in there, and you get all those routines in the app. So if you want to check it out, the app is free for a week. There is no contract, so even if you only signed up for my app for 3 months, you can cancel at any time. But just know too that our app directly supports all of the work that Eddie and I do. But I'm giddy knowing that this conversation came up and Eddie decided to jump in on the app. I did not tell him to do this. I did not say, go do my 30-day program. I don't know. I guess he just thinks I'm amazing.
That's it. That's it. But day 4 is today, so we'll see.
You like other trainers in the app too. I'm just going to be honest. So Eddie is in that. That's the cool thing about the app, about my app. It's rooted in the Playbook app, but you need to use my link to sign up, people. But the Playbook app itself has hundreds of trainers in there. So if you only like gym stuff, there's gym stuff in there. There's all different types of trainers. There's different sports-focused trainers. And for those of you that just like yoga, Pilates, or you just want mobility stuff, there's prenatal stuff in there. And then there's also nutrition, sleep. There's so many incredible things in the app. So the features itself, what you get access to is endless. So you actually have spent more time with other trainers in the app. That's why I'm so excited that he chose mine.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic. I think you knew how basic that program was.
Yeah.
So
no, I think it
does not stress you out.
Well, yeah, that's it. And the goal is just to get consistent and so that's why I started.
Bring it back. Well,
bring it back.
I will say that 2024 is our year. People have been asking. We kind of had a few setbacks this year with the 200s. I wanted to roll out several race training programs, but 2024 is the year we will be rolling out more race programs that are for road and ultra.
Yep.
So if you are interested in that stuff, yes, that will be rolling out. We want to welcome all of our listeners, young and old and in between. You can call yourself whatever it is. So to our 5-year-old listeners, we did this last time. We gave a shout out to all the kids, and it was so fun getting videos of these sweet little faces sent to Eddie and I, and then comments from parents who said they were listening to our podcast while they drove along. So we are giving a special shout out to our youth today.
Yep.
Eddie and I, and we're speaking directly to our youth, just so you guys know, When Eddie and I first started dating, one of the reasons I absolutely fell in love with him was his love for kids. And you and I have had several jobs together, coaching and serving youth.
Yep.
So we were soccer coaches together at soccer camps in the summer. Remember that?
I do.
Seahorses.
I remember.
We have so many good stories. You know the
What?
the gauntlet.
The gauntlet. Yeah. It's not one of my proudest memories.
Oh my gosh. Okay, there was this game that we would play, kids. This would not be allowed at sports camps anymore.
It would be canceled.
It would be canceled. So Eddie and I, we would do these week-long summer camps. Sports camps are so much fun. You drop your kids off, you go and you do the sport you love with like hundreds of other kids. And most of the time the counselors are college age.
Yeah.
And then you have a couple of the leaders that run the whole program. They're a little bit older. So it's fun. It was fun for us as counselors because we're hanging out a lot of times with our teammates from college because they would run this camp at Biola University. And there was this game. By the end of the week, when you're hanging out with a bunch of little kids, you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, I am done hanging out with youth. We've always loved doing that, though. I mean, I feel like we've done these camps for many, many years. But there was this game called the Gauntlet. And all it was counselors would stand on the outskirts of the field, so like on the soccer field, but they reduced it, so it'd be like a mini soccer field. And the kids would stand at the end zone or like on one side of the field, and they would have to run to the other side of the field without getting hit by a soccer ball. That counselors on both sides of the field, we would be kicking soccer balls at kids. Like, what is that game?
Who came up with that one?
And I'm not going to lie, there was one kid that Eddie targeted.
That is not true. That is not true.
This is not true. Eddie had big love for kids, but we could not believe that this was actually a game that we got to play, because there was a few kids that accidentally got,
well, the idea
above the waist.
Yeah, the idea is you kick the ball, and as the kids are running, you hit them in the shin or the foot, and they're out, right?
Yeah.
But when they're running and there's only a couple more left, you try to like time it, and the ball gets a little high.
Okay, when you have college soccer players who are playing at a high level, and you got these sweet little kids just, I love this game. There's a couple balls that were maybe, kicked out maybe a little bit too hard.
Yeah.
We bring this story up and laugh about it often. I don't know why it makes me laugh. We were like 19 years old when we were doing this.
We were kids too.
But it's funny that I started this conversation by saying one of the reasons why I fell in love with that is because it's for love for kids. And I talk about you kicking soccer balls at kids, taking them out in this gauntlet game.
Sounds pretty demented.
Oh, no, but we did do a lot together. And over the years, it's just been really fun. And then, of course, when we first got married, you could not wait to have kids.
Yeah.
So Eddie went on to be an elementary school teacher for a while, and then he was a youth pastor, and we've always done stuff with youth. So all that to say, big shout out to our youth listeners.
Yep.
We love you guys. We appreciate you listening as well. And then to our runners who are out on a run right now, who have push play, and you're probably already 10 minutes into your run and you're thinking, this is going to be a great run because I have my besties Eddie and Sally along with me. And we'll tell you what, we love running with you, and we hope that you enjoy today's podcast. To those on the bike and at the gym, lifting, making dinner, and driving, a huge shout out to you as well. We just love being with you guys. So welcome all.
All right. So speaking of some of the listeners, we have quite a few people that would write in, reviews, Spotify or Apple, but then like some emails or like the Facebook group talking about the podcast. I wanted to read a couple. So the first one I'm going to read is an email that we got from Rebecca. Said, "Hi Sally and Eddie, I love the podcast, and I wanted to reach out and say that not only do Harley riders listen to your podcast, but dual sport motorcyclists do too." That's me. Dual sport motorcyclists ride both pavement and dirt roads. The dirt roads are the part I enjoy the most, submersed in nature. Long story short, breast cancer at 46 in 2015. chemo, radiation, bilateral mastectomy, the works. But triathlon got me through it all, and I went on to complete half Ironman in 2018, and 5 years to the day of completing radiation, I completed the Ironman Chattanooga in 2021. I currently am mostly running because of family commitments, and I always look forward to your podcast. Thanks for all the time that you and Eddie put into the podcast. Rebecca.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing that. These are, I feel like it's daily now, Ed. You and I, at some point during the day, sit down, and we're getting quite a bit now, but I want our listeners to know this. We read these. We don't always get to respond to them, but they do fill our home and our time and our hearts. And we so appreciate when you share your stories with us, when you take the time to encourage us. Every Spotify review and comment, every DM that we get really means a lot. So thank you. And Rebecca, what an inspiration you are. Truly, massive inspiration. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that people who just heard that little snippet of your story just now are also inspired.
Yeah, that was cool. This one's from Cassie from the Facebook group. I'm just going to read part of it. I'm not going to read all of it, but she said, I ran my first marathon on Saturday. I can't even begin to describe how amazing it felt to accomplish this. I found Sally about a month into my training. The YouTube videos, the Choose Strong podcast, and following Sally and Eddie on Instagram has helped me more than words can describe. At mile 15, I didn't think I was going to make it. I pulled my headphones out and I listened to the latest 2 podcasts, and I finished the remaining miles with Sally and Eddie with me. Then she went on and said a bunch of nice things about the podcast, and then at the very end she says, I can't wait to take you with me on my very first 60K in May.
Oh, heck yeah. Let's go, Cassie. Congratulations. What a joy to know that we got to accompany her to the finish line. Cassie, thank you for bringing us along. And to all our listeners, we are always rooting for you guys. I mean, Eddie and I both, we know the power of support, of teamwork, of having people there that care about you and your goals. I mean, we're going to dive into the 200s here in just a minute. And I can say wholeheartedly that because of my incredible crew chief, Eddie, and those that devoted their time and their energy, our pacers, our other crew members, that really made this experience, I really believed in myself, because of that support that I had, but also all the memories that I have with these people is the best part. So when Eddie and I get to join you guys for a race, it just really brightens our day. For everyone, we want you to know we're always rooting for you.
You need to have a 20-minute loop of like a podcast that just says you,
Coach Sally,
just having you yelling, drop the hammer.
For 20 minutes.
So
drop the hammer. You can do it. Suck it up.
When people want to quit, they just turn that on to get fired up. All right, last one. This one's an actual review on Apple. This is from Ellie. The title is Inspired While Fighting an Injury. I recently had to drop out of my first marathon due to an injury. I turned to Sally's videos and podcasts while I was feeling down. I felt like my best friend was giving me advice. There were moments that had me laughing out loud while walking to class, and moments that had me tearing up. I felt so inspired to get back at it and implement more strength training into my routine to combat injuries going forward. Thanks so much, Sally and Eddie. You have no idea how much we appreciate you.
Say her name again.
Ellie.
I think you sent this to me yesterday, and it just brought a huge smile on my face. Ellie, thank you so much for sharing that with us, and very proud of you to keep moving forward. Love that you see the value in strength as well. But honestly, my favorite part is when I hear people say that they were encouraged and they were laughing or smiling. Yeah. I'm like, I love that we
My favorite part of that one was she was listening to this podcast on the way to class.
Heck yeah.
She's like, I'm going to get some Choose Strong in before I go sit in my math class.
Let's go.
I like that.
Let's go. Well, Ed, why don't we go ahead and transition right in to these 200-mile races.
Let's do it.
We have a lot of different topics to cover. So first, we're just going to break down the 4 that I did. And I do understand that a common question, Ed, people want to know what my favorite one is. Yeah. It was difficult to choose a favorite one because there are so many subcategories as to why something is your favorite. You know, I think just in anything. So I am really approaching this in like a holistic, perspective, kind of really helping people that if you are going to do this, here are all the positives and the good things about each race that is really important to consider if you are going to choose one here in the United States. 200-mile races are on the rise. We're starting to see them more in ultrasignup.com. By the way, that actually was a question. Someone said, how do I sign up for ultra races, trail races? Ultrasignup.com is the main hub. You can check out the races there. You can do filtered searches and just type in 200-mile race. You're going to find a lot more 200-mile races than we've ever seen. And the distances are also increasing. I know Candace Burt with Destination Trails is currently putting together a 300-mile race, which incredible. I mean, I'm wondering, Ed, if in 5-10 years, if the 500-mile distance is just going to be standard. Like, oh, that's cute. You've done 100? Aw.
Is that what you're going to do for 2024 then? Is that what we're talking about?
We're not talking about my goals today. Oh. This will be a 2-part series too. So today we're really going to break down the 200s. We do have another episode coming up with how to train and successfully execute a 200-mile race. We really deep dive into my training. That is where we're going to tackle a lot of the questions that go into that. So our hope with both this episode and the training episode, all surrounded around the 200s, is that this will be a mainstay, a guide and source for you yourself, the listener, if you're looking to do 200s, if you want to be a pacer, a crew, or if you have a friend that is doing a 200, these 2 episodes will benefit them. So we do hope that that you share them. And of course, they'll live forever on our site. So the 4 races we did, the first one was Cocodona 250, and that starts in Phoenix, Arizona. It is a point-to-point race, which means you're never hitting the same aid station twice. And because it's 250 miles, guess what? You are traveling across varied terrain. The race ends in Flagstaff, Arizona, which most people, when they think of Arizona, Ed, they don't think of alpine, high altitude, cooler temperatures, and mountains.
Think of hot desert cactus. That's what comes to mind.
Yes, and you do hit a lot of that, especially in the first 100 miles, especially. But you go through Prescott, you go through Jerome, Sedona. Mm-hmm. Oh, those red rocks are so beautiful. So a point-to-point race, 250 miles. This year was its 3rd year. And I'll tell you what, and this is common among many of the longer races, this was the 3rd time that the course was altered a little bit. So sometimes they do have to change routes. And because the course is so long, you never know with either fires or snowpack what's going to happen that year. When we get talking about Tahoe, kind of same thing for Tahoe. They've had to change the course almost every year or alter it because of fires and snowpack. So I do believe it's going back to the same course next year, though. So with the Cocodona 250, what I found, now this is with Aravaipa racing. The other 3 that I did were all Destination Trails races. Aravaipa put on this 250-mile race. And what I noticed was one of the biggest differences between the Aravaipa 250-mile and the other 3 200s was that I got to see my crew way more at that race. It seemed a little bit more that there was more opportunities to see your crew. There's more opportunities to change your pacers in and out. If you read some of the race reports, I can't remember if it was String Bean who has won this race. He said, or maybe it was, anyway, it was one of the top 3 guys. They had 10 different pacers. And I thought that is so cool because that actually makes it a little bit easier, especially if you have pacers that can't maybe dedicate their 3, 4, 5 days to be out there with you the whole time. They can just show up, run 15 miles, and then that's it. They're, can go on about their day and leave and don't have to stay there for the entire race. So I did feel like with Cocodona 250, you had more opportunities to change out pacers. You could have a variety of pacers. There wasn't a limit on pacers. So some races, and totally understandable, will say, hey, you can have one pacer, or you can have at most two. And so much of this has to do with logistics, permitting, the number of people that they want on the land. So we, as trail runners, the ultra running community, we're always very aware of protecting the land and making sure that we don't do anything to destroy it. So this idea of, don't leave any trace when you're out there, we take that seriously. So different areas of the country are going to have different rules. They'll have different permitting guidelines, and race directors don't want to lose their permits or this opportunity to put on a race. And so I think what's really important and that we learned as we went on through each of the races is that you really have to read the guides and the rules and the regulations and really understand there's reasons behind why you can have so many crew pacers, why there's so many checkpoints, and why maybe other races don't have as many.
Yeah.
And I think what would be good at this point, we're just going to shoot it straight with our listeners and say the registration fee for any 200-mile race might be alarming. But this is also something that I believe for some people is a bucket list race. Some people turn these into vacations. On average, you're going to want to plan at least 5 days of your life devoted to the race. And so we're talking travel, you're talking pre-race day registration, getting all your gear together. And then, of course, there's always like that plus or minus 1 day or maybe even 2 days that you don't really know when you're going to finish. So these races give you 5 to 6 days to finish. So I think it's wise to give yourself a nice cushion. So if you're looking just to finish one of these, because, we're looking at 105 hours to 115 hour cutoff times. That's a long time. You want to take that into account. So all that to say, when you think of an event that's lasting multiple days, the registration fees kind of match that. You're looking at the volunteers, the amount of food, multi-day permits that are required. They have to have medical out there, security out there. There's a lot going on. So registration fees, as I saw it, range from $1,600 to $1,800. We were very grateful and so appreciative of both Destination Trails and Aravaipa Racing gave me free registration for these races, totally respecting that I do this as a job. This is my career as a professional runner. We also went in with full focus on wanting to really expose these races. And so all of our sponsors invested a lot of money and time and energy into making films, reels, posts on Instagram. We really wanted to learn as much as we could about these races and really share as much as we could about these races. So we have the Moab film coming out at the end of this year. There's a Cocodona film if you want to check that out. So we really do help between the podcasts, the films, all the content we put out that our listeners, you guys are getting a good idea of what these are like. So right away, registration fee is going to be expensive. You now have to factor in your travel, the finances you're going to be, the money you're going to be spending on travel, hotel. If you are going to be renting a car, you got to add that in as well. And then if you have crew and pacers and you want to house them, pay for their food, all these things start to add up. And just to give you a good snapshot, the first year that I did Badwater, and that was also an expensive race, that one's $1,500. To stay out in Death Valley near Badwater Basin, there's only 2 options for hotels. And of course they raise those prices before you go in. And then we wanted hotels in Lone Pine for the end for everyone. So it's kind of known, you pay for your crew, pacers, everything. We spent, and then we had a special van. We spent almost $10,000, to do that race. Thankfully, with the support of my sponsors, I was able to fund those things. So I like to talk about the finance part because not everyone gets that opportunity to get funding to do a race. And so one way to approach the 200s is I'm going to use this as a race to do on my bucket list. and this is absolutely something I want to do, because you have to take time off work. You're asking other people to take off multiple days. It really is an adventure. And I think that's a great way to look at it, is I'm going to go on this incredible adventure and I'm going to be supported along the way. And so it is an investment you have to make, but I'll tell you what, it's a wonderful investment too. I loved every single experience that I had. And I can see why I met so many people that have done these multiple times. I mean, I went to Cocodona, like, this is my third time. I was at Tahoe. Yeah. This is my fourth time. I'm like, wow. So these really are special. Eddie, can you share with us a little bit about Cocodona? We are going to break down what it was like for you as a crew chief, what your experience was like, because I know, being in the sport for so long, I really do care about the experience for my crew. It's very easy to be self-focused and just, I'm in a race, this is my strategy. But if your crew is not having a good time, if your crew is not able to sleep or get food, or it is just a very stressful situation to crew a race, I think you really need to think good and hard about that. So can you explain what your specific experience was like at Cocodona?
Cocodona, I really liked crewing that one because there was one, I think it was the first one, or maybe the second one. The aid station was like the furthest you had to drive, like an hour, I think.
Was that the beehive one, the first one, when you saw me at mile 38?
Yeah. That was like the holding spot.
Let's break that down, because I know Sarah Ostawisi, who went on to win and also paced me at Moab. She decided not to have her crew there. That was her third time doing that. And I think, having done it so many times, she was like, you guys don't need to go there.
Yeah.
And you kind of explained to me that was pretty difficult to get to. Didn't it take you a long time?
Yeah, it was just like a dirt road, kind of a one-car dirt road for like an hour. Yeah, it was a rough drive, but...
And you had we had our car, so we have an Expedition. And did you feel like, man, I'm so grateful I have this Expedition? Would like a Subaru or like a normal, Toyota Tacoma, do you feel like you had to have a special car to get out there?
Not really. No, it was just long, bumpy ride. It was, yeah. The only thing about I can see how Sarah said that you don't need to go to that one, but for us, that was when we saw you and your feet were starting to be trashed. So it was actually kind of critical that we were there to support you and help you. But anyways,
that meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
I was grateful.
Yeah. But I do see her side of like, it's 30 miles in, like.
Well, it's a drop bag station.
Yeah, true.
Our listeners need to know, this is a very common question. 100% yes, you can do any of these 200-mile races without a crew.
Yep.
The aid stations are wonderful, and this is why I say again and really highlight Cocodona 250, because their aid stations are closer together. There's less mileage in between their aid stations. You get to see your crew more. So if you are choosing to do these without a crew, without pacers, and it's your first one, I would pick Cocodona just for that, because you get the most support there. Now, every other 200 I did, I always met people. Those were their first. Their Bigfoot was their first race. Tahoe was their first race. Moab was their first race, and they also did not have crew or pacers. So this is actually common to hear runners do these entirely on their own. And we'll get into the pacing stuff and delirium and stuff like that later. But I do want you as a listener, rest assured, you don't have to have a team in order to do this. Is it advantageous? Yes, it is. Especially if you want to race them. It is nice to have a little bit more support. But I know that even people on the podium, they don't always have crew and pacers either. So you can still get on the podium. You can win these races without crew and pacers. I think it just comes with experience. You start to get better at strategy and everything. You kind of have a better handle on what to do. So I am really speaking to the first timer. If you're choosing one, that is something to consider. Choose the one that it's going to have the most support for you. More opportunities for a drop bag. The aid stations are a little bit closer together. I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, Cocodona did a really good job of that. Felt like all their aid stations were really stocked with everything that you would need.
Great food.
Yeah.
Great food choices there. I feel like it was very common to see medical staff at each
Yeah,
of
all
them.
this, even the sleep station stuff were very like, signs of like keep quiet, like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, we're making it a point for these racers to like actually be able to sleep.
They had 3 buildings
Mm-hmm.
to sleep in,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
completely
you're
separate from where you get food. And I thought that was premium.
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting that. And I don't. I mean, if I ever do a 200 again, I will never expect a building where I can
Yeah.
go in and sleep. I mean, you don't get private room or anything, but like that one, I think was like a church, and the whole hall was just cots, and there was air conditioning,
Yeah.
and it was, you could hear a pin drop in there. It was so quiet,
Mm-hmm.
and no one was allowed in there
Right.
except for runners.
Yep.
I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I felt Cocodona was great to crew. I think the time in between when I would see you was plenty of time where we can, like, the crew and pacers, we can go grab food, and everything was pretty close, like within the cities, and plus it was just cool cities. We've talked about it before, but like, yeah, we get to spend some time in Sedona, we get to spend some time in Prescott, we get to spend some time in Jerome. Like, all those places were super cool to spend a few hours before we got to see you again.
Eddie, I talked to a few runners who do these races, and they aim to do like 40 to 50 miles a day, and they actually will book hotels
Mm-hmm.
at some of the aid stations that drop. I mean, some of these aid stations drop you right into the heart of the city. They drop you right into Jerome, right into Prescott, right. So it is really nice for crew
Mm-hmm.
when they know they're going to see you in an aid station where it's like, oh, I can get a coffee here, I can grab a pizza or a burger here.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that these are, like, is Cocodona a race where if I had an 8-year-old and 12-year-old, could I bring them along? Is that kind of feel like that's an adventure that they would enjoy, or do you see that as being stressful or boring? Or because if you're going through all these cities, is that
Yeah.
like fun for them, or is it just, it's also a lot of driving?
Yeah, it's a lot of driving, but I definitely feel that you could do that with kids, and you can pull that off. It'd be obviously a bit more planning, because you'd want to, the tough part is that you're trying to hit different parts of the city or certain cities at certain times, 'cause you're trying to time it with your runner, right? So like, we didn't know if you're coming in at night at Sedona or during the day, and then you're gone, you're not there for very long. Thankfully you came during the day, so we got to see Sedona. But yeah, that would be the only tricky part, like trying to time everything.
Like, I was sad I came into Jerome at night.
Yeah.
Everyone told me what a cool city that is. It feels
Yes.
like, you're in the Italian Alps almost. And
Yeah.
you talked so much about that after the race.
Yeah, because we got there and got to spend, we got there in the afternoon, and we had dinner at a cool little restaurant, and so we got to see it a little bit more. And then, you came in at the night, so you didn't get to see it, but it is a cool city.
Mm-hmm. And what was sleep like for you? And now I know, just personality-wise, being my husband, I feel like you are always a little anxious about me. It's hard for you to actually fall into a deep sleep when you're thinking about me out there. But I'm curious how you slept in the expedition. We actually got off Amazon these super cool air mattresses that are for SUVs.
Yeah.
And we would put the seats down in the back, and this air mattress fits just on one side of the folded down seats. It was incredible, because I slept on it a lot. And I know that was something that you slept on too.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there was actually spots where you could sleep, or was it just too loud?
No, yeah, you can sleep. That thing was actually really nice to have, because there are a lot of parks and just random empty spots and parking lots, and you can pull up and just catch a few hours. I mean, for me personally, I didn't sleep a ton, but there were definitely places that you can, and even a lot of hotels on that course that you can utilize. That I didn't, obviously, but you can, if someone was to do that route too, they can definitely pull that off there. So it's not like remote, and it's through these cities, and so there's tons of places to stay.
That's encouraging to hear. So I think, from just my perspective, even as a runner, I appreciated you having a bigger vehicle. And I think if you're going to go in and rent a vehicle, it is nice to have a larger one where both the runner could lay down. If they do, like, I never wanted to go into the sleep stations. I ended up twice. I mean, we were not planning for me to be in so much physical pain at Cocodona. But I did sleep in the car. I think one time I slept in there for an hour and a half.
Yep.
That was very, very helpful. So I appreciated that. If you were in just like a small car, you know, like a Toyota Camry, that would have been a lot harder. I mean, I suppose I could like lounge in the front seat, but there was something about being able to lie flat.
Yeah.
I think for you too, being able to lie flat when you're just sitting driving.
For sure. Well, not driving, but...
Well, I'm sorry. When you have been driving all day is what I meant.
Been driving, yeah.
When you've been driving all day, it's nice to finally like lay flat and not sit and sleep at the wheel.
No,
changing that position. Mm-hmm. Okay, what is there anything else that we should cover for Cocodona on the crew side? What did you think for pacers? Because we had 2 pacers. You know, did you feel like... Bryce paced me for one section. Summer's partner too paced me for one section, but it was primarily Shelby and Summer going back and forth. They both had their own cars. What was, sometimes a lot of people won't have pacers and crew because the dynamics is so confusing and overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And even some rules at some of these races are so strict. They're so afraid. I know for me, I'm always like, I don't want to be disqualified because a pacer drove up somewhere and they weren't supposed to. And
I felt just because it's the freshest. Moab was pretty strict. Moab was very stressful with car situation and pacers and dropping them off versus Cocodona. I felt Cocodona was pretty seamless where they can there's lots of room to park other vehicles, and I was never stressed with them, finding spots or we can only have one car. Because
you were fetching people in Moab. You would have to, thank goodness for Leo Fung being there. But because we had Leo there and it was like, okay, I'm going to go here. You go get the pacer. Right. I'm going to drive here. I mean, that was...
Yeah, there's very, very limited places to park just because of the permitting. And so, we would have to go and pick the pacer up somewhere or wherever they're at their car if they parked in some random
if I'm arriving at 1 a.m., you're not sleeping then because you've just spent an hour and a half, 2 hours driving back and forth to get a pacer.
Yeah, so Cocodona was different in that regard, which is nice that I didn't have to worry about that.
Mm-hmm. That's a key point. Mm-hmm. Again, I'm very aware of pacer crew experience. I want it to be a good experience for them, especially because I'm asking people to sacrifice their time, their energy, their training, take time off work away from their families. I don't take that lightly. And I think it's something that, is to be considered, especially if you want to ask these people to do things in the future or vice versa. If they then want you to jump in too, I think we should always be considerate of each other's time, and that great support they're giving isn't just filling your bottles and running alongside with you. It's if they're losing sleep and they haven't been able to find a hot meal in 18 hours, that can start to compound with the overall experience for everyone. And I'll tell you what, when people are tired and they're irritable and cranky, I mean, there's that starts to weigh in when you're coming into aid stations too. Like they're just not going to have a lot of patience for you, or it's just not going to be fun for anyone. So, I really like to pay attention to what experience will the crew and pacers have. And I'll tell you what, this is one of the reasons why we decided, I was more heavy on this decision than you were, for you to not go to Bigfoot. Because Bigfoot 200 if you're going to go to those aid stations, you are driving over 700 miles to crew your runner. Yeah. And I just thought, there's just no way. Like, it just isn't fair to you. We just had done Tahoe, and to ask you to go back and drive all around. So thankfully we had Joe and Leo for that, who were just stoked to do it. They were up for it. That was their first time hopping in with me, but I was overflowing with gratitude just to have those two, because at one point I decided to not have any pacers or crew because I had heard of so many other runners that are doing these races without pacer and crew. So I do want the listeners to know, I almost did Bigfoot with no pacers and no crew at all, mainly because I was very aware of how stressful the driving situation is for Bigfoot 200. Bigfoot 200 is an absolutely stunning course. And there were several runners out there that, like I said, you could be, you can do it without pacers and crew. The distance between the aid stations was a little rough. I'll be honest. You got to pack that. You have to pack your pack very heavy to make sure you have enough supplies. But I want to go in order here. I know we're jumping ahead. So
really quick back to Cocodona. Another thing that I really loved. Well, there was a few. So one was because they were through cities, and for me as a crew, I had access to the internet, like most of the race, like pretty much the whole race.
Yeah. Which meant you were also able to work.
Yes, so I would find a coffee shop, and I can kind of post up for a few hours, and still have plenty of time to get to the next station and wait for you. So that was nice. I was able
That's really good
to
insight
work and
for partners that want to be a part of crew, but are like, dude, I cannot take 4 days off, but I can work remotely. And so Cocodona is a race, in your opinion, that if you work remotely, you would be able to have chunks of time.
Yeah, there were chunks of hours that I was able to work and check in, with the kids back at home. So that was nice. And then in terms of like the race coverage was excellent. They have the live stream pretty much the whole time, and there you can, because I had the internet, I was able to jump in on the feed and kind of see what people were talking about and get updates and coverage of you.
Well, I remember it was either Shelby or Summer I was with, and we got to hear Mike McKnight finish, and we were like so stoked because Mike McKnight's story there was incredible. He went from like 76th place to absolutely crushing as the champion.
Right.
And because the live stream and you get reception all throughout the course too. There is very little sections that we as runners didn't have reception. And so the pacer sometimes would be like, let's just listen to the live stream as we run, and you could hear the commentators talking, and they're talking about the front runners and what's going on there, but then they're just like talking, just talking about running and joking with each other, and so you kind of felt like you were running with friends while you were in this race. So I did,
especially at that like 2 a.m. 3 a.m. and they're still talking.
The coverage was unparalleled.
It was
and
really
I know that Aravaipa, so this is like very signature to Aravaipa. I mean, other organizations and races call upon Aravaipa to come and do live race coverage because they do it so well. Yeah. And it was really neat because I would come to aid stations. Obviously I wasn't on my, on my phone on the live stream. It was usually the pacers, but you would come in and tell me, oh my gosh, I'm in the chat right now and there's yellow hearts everywhere and people are saying hi, and you'd just give me all these encouraging words from the chat. And that really lifted my spirits. I mean, especially at I had a couple extremely low dark times, and you made it a point to just convey what was going on in the chat. So I love that for anybody considering this, and they really do try to get all throughout the course. They're obviously they want to follow the race leaders. People love to see the race going on, but I think they do a good job of just getting in the aid stations and talking to different people. I remember Jamil found me in a group of runners at like mile 20, and he filmed a bunch of people, and I thought, oh man, that's so cool. So yeah, that is a good point. I'm glad that you bring that up. Both the Wi-Fi, the race coverage.
Yeah, and then the last thing I'll mention is the finish is like kind of right downtown Flagstaff in that kind of square where there's restaurants, and I thought it was super cool because I just kind of posted up, waiting, knowing that you were coming in. I wasn't able to see you again for the last 20 miles or whatever it was, maybe more. I can't remember. And I know you had to climb Mount Eldon and, come back down. So I knew it was going to be a while. So I was able to sit right there in that square, but there was like a coffee shop that I was literally looking through the window, looking at the finish line. So I saw, all the people, around the finish line. I was able to kind of work, but also keep an eye on the finish line. I thought that was pretty cool, having that option too. But yeah, so Cocodona, I really liked.
I liked that at Cocodona, you could finish, and then there was just a whole street full of hotels you could go stay at. Yeah,
they're right there.
Yeah,
yep.
And I think that's nice too. So you want to book hotels in advance at different locations. That was tricky for us to get used to. If it's a point to point, and the start and the race registration is at one spot, and then you have the finish line somewhere else, it can be a little tricky when you're getting lodging and then you don't know what day you're going to finish. But yeah, we started to figure that out a little bit better as we moved along. Let's go ahead and move on to Tahoe 200. Tahoe 200 originally was supposed to be just 6 weeks after Cocodona 250. That's when it usually is, the middle of June. I believe it was originally supposed to be June 16th, which, if you are familiar with Northern California or the mountains here in California, we still have snow on our bigger mountains beginning middle of June all the way through. It usually starts to be almost gone by the second week of July. So historically, that's kind of how it works. So because of that, June is the Tahoe 200. You'll notice if you go on the site, you'll see a lot of runners in cold weather clothes. So they have beanies on, they have long tights, and the original race course does go around. It circumnavigates Tahoe. Now, there have been fires, snowpack. The race directors have had to work really hard to create new routes several times. And so we ran a new route this year, which was you are at the start in, I think it was Homewood. Heavenly, yeah. I'm sorry. Heavenly Resort. I don't know. Homewood is one of the aid stations. And you spend 100K away, the first 100K, first 62 miles, away from the lake. Mm-hmm. And so the next 140 miles is an out and back on the lake. So this year, it was also incredibly hot because the race had to be moved to the end of July. So to our listeners, these two points are very important for you, because if you're thinking about doing Tahoe 200, make sure that you go and check the site to see what route they're doing. Because Tahoe City, I think that area, which was the turnaround point on the lake, I know that area used to be a start. They had started on that side of the lake one year. So when you're looking even at finishing times and all of that, the course has changed quite a bit. And so you want to find out what course is being run. I know the goal is always to run the original course, which is to go around, the lake. What I found with running it in July at altitude is those are two factors you absolutely need to train for, because running at altitude is just one thing. And we got up to like 9,600 feet in this race, and then you're pretty much running at altitude the entire time, because I think our hotel sat like at 6,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And then you're always kind of going up and down to like 8,500, drop down to 6, 8,500, drop down to 6. But when you add heat to altitude, and if you're not used to those things or you haven't trained in those things, it can affect you. And so that's a really key thing that you want to train for. I didn't touch on this on Cocodona. Heat is definitely a big part of that race. Now, personally for me, I love the heat. I do very well in the heat. I've spent many years heat training, mainly because of bad water. I was never hot at Cocodona. I got warm, but like heat was never a factor for me. At Lake Tahoe, the heat was okay, but I was sick. Mm-hmm. And so my system was pretty fried at that race. If you watch our Tahoe film, I'm pretty beat up like 30 miles in, but it was really the temperature rising inside and a system that was pretty beat up. So keep in mind that sometimes the race will be moved mainly because of snowpack. If there's fires, you just never know. The California fires in the last 5 years have been devastating our mountains and our trails. It's been very heartbreaking, and it's very hard to plan for those things. So it is unfortunate. I think this is an unfortunate side. A lot of people that had signed up for the race then couldn't do the race or had to defer to the next year because they had already locked those dates in, whether for work, vacation, travel, family stuff. And so they weren't able to do the new date at the end of July. So I'm very grateful it wasn't canceled. It was a lot of hard work to get it moved to the end of July. But those are things to think about with these races. When they are that long, they cover so much land. There is a chance, and make sure you read this in the registration, because they'll tell you what their rules are about refunds, deferments, all of that. It's a big financial investment. It's a big time investment. So make sure that you take the time to read how they go about natural disasters and causes that are out of their control, whether or not you're going to get money back or you can run it the next year, or what that looks like. So we ran at the end of July. It was hot. You got that altitude, a different course. And what I found in Tahoe, I felt like, and Eddie, you're going to kind of run with this one and give a deep dive into it. I felt like the experience for crew is probably the best
Mm-hmm.
because you are always around the lake, and especially with the original course, at any given time you can get to a grocery store, a cheeseburger, a coffee house. I feel like you could have family and just like rent out a cabin or have a hotel, and you could get to them at any time. They can go down to the lake if they want. They don't even need to help crew.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like just having access to resources, but also you're just in this, everywhere you go is beautiful.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoyed that course. I went up and trained on it. I did a 3-day, 100-mile training camp like 5-6 weeks before I ran the race. And I had the best time doing recon on the race. And I just loved that any given time I could like see the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so close to the roads and resources. Like I just felt really, it was really easy to navigate. So the course itself too is a permanent course. So the Tahoe Rim Trail, the TRT, is permanently marked. So I also felt like it was the easiest to navigate. You know, of course, we are required to carry a topo map. You have to have your phone with you that has the map downloaded to it, which is insanely helpful. Oh my gosh. And then you want that extra battery with your phone. But yeah, I just felt Tahoe was stunning. You have that lake, you have the alpine trees. The terrain itself is, for the most part, fairly smooth. I mean, you're definitely going to hit sections that have rocks and stuff like that because this trail is so frequently traveled. It is buffed out. Mm-hmm. So there are sections where you can pedal really well and just really settle into a pace if you're feeling good. But Eddie, why don't you break down the crew experience, pacer experience, getting pacers where they need to go?
Yeah, like you said, Tahoe was a breeze in terms of like crewing, just because like you said, you have access to everything. You have access to like cool. So best example is you wanted those smoothies, and we were able to go grab like fresh smoothies like pretty much any time of the day, you know. But yeah, we were able to go hit 7-Eleven for Gatorades and find, you know, fresh smoothies. So that part was nice for crew, the access to get stuff. Pacers, that you know, it wasn't too difficult, but it because it was limited in terms of parking. Well, so in July it's really crowded in Tahoe because it's
very popular vacation spot.
Very popular.
If you're not familiar with Tahoe, it is a destination city and location in Northern California.
Yeah, so
very
there's
crowded.
not a ton of parking. It is very, very crowded. You know, getting to certain places, you don't drive a ton, but yeah, it does take a little bit longer just because there's so many cars with, you know, so many people. But yeah, getting pacers to you know, getting them dropped off where they need to be was not an issue. wasn't bad. In terms of like my experience, you know, driving around, like there's tons of time to go, and yeah, like if you want to go on the lake, I remember talking to Abby. She was a wife of, you know, she was crewing her husband, and she said, you know, after you guys left and did the 100K and before you came back to the start, like she's like, oh yeah, I went out like on the lake and, you know, spent the day. She did something I can't remember, like some paddle thing, and you know, you can have a whole day, like, you know, that first day to yourself pretty much, because you got to wait. You leave the start line, but you come back to the start line, you know, after 60 miles. And so that part was cool. I didn't utilize that day as I probably should have. I think I did a little bit more work than play that day. But yeah, you can definitely get on the lake, and that first day. Then throughout the race, yeah, you're just always around the lake all the time. There's great food there. I mean, I went to so many. Jason and I, who has helped me crew, we went to so many good like pizza places.
Well, Jason Humes has a house up there, right? Like, or that's where they vacation with their family every year.
Yeah, they have they vacation there every. So it was good to have him because he was he
knew all the spots,
keen on what places to be and where to go, and that was nice to have. So, but yeah, there's tons of places to eat, tons of places to hang out, and obviously, like you said, the lake's always there, and you know, it's beautiful. And yeah, it's very cool to crew that one.
Now, the thing that I do need to make note of for people that want to do Tahoe without crew or pacers, it is important to know that aid stations are a little bit further apart. Now, Tahoe 200 is the first in the destination trails races. So Tahoe 200, Bigfoot 200, Moab 240, that is part of the Triple Crown if you do all three of them, but they are all run by destination trails. And so destination trails, what we noticed was the aid, for all of them, the aid stations are a little bit further apart than the Cocodona 250. Their rules and permitting as far as how many cars can be in an aid station, pacers, all of that, it is different than the way that our VIPA runs it. So I felt a little bit more strict with that. I would say that, you know, you're also like Tahoe 200. I think it's incredible that they were able just to pull permits to run a race there, because that trail and that park, you know, working with that organization to get a racer, I know is incredibly difficult. And the same thing with Bigfoot 200. You're in insanely remote areas, and then of course Moab, that park too, like the national park, very strict. Right. So I do feel that that is something to take into consideration. You need to be prepared to, I felt like pretty consistently, just plan for the most part to not see an aid station for 20 miles. So if you can just pack your, you know, get your pack going in a way that you're like, okay, I'm going to have enough food and gear. And they do a good job. They have Facebook pages in the weeks leading up to the race. As they're marking the course, they'll tell you where there's fresh water sources. So everyone starts to carry most of the runners are carrying filter bottles. So we use the Caden filtered bottle. And that thing, I mean, I must have filtered like a gallon of water just when I was doing my training camp up there. And it's like amazing mountain water. So I'd say every race that I did outside of Moab was the only one that I didn't use the filter bottle, but Tahoe and Bigfoot, I used it a lot, and it came very handy, especially when it was hot and I drank all my water, because it is kind of hard to carry enough water for 20 miles, depending on if you're in a moment of struggle, how fast you're going, what part of the day it is. You know, sometimes you just slow down so much that for some people, 20 miles could take them, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours even. If you're moving, you know, 2 miles an hour at that point, you're not feeling well. That's a long time to be without water. So it was helpful to join the Facebook page for the Destination Shell races. Follow along with the guy that I think his name's Riley. He was posting every day. It would take him several days to mark the course, and he would post pictures and tell you where the fresh water sources were, where you could filter water. So I always paid really close attention. Great conversations there too. I learned a lot from veteran runners who had done Tahoe before, you know, just suggestions on gear and what to carry and what certain parts of the terrain were like. And, oh yeah, this is a good section. You can really run fast here. Or, oh, this is a little bit more technical. Or just knowing like, oh, that section has a lot of shade. So that was really helpful. I think if you're going to do those races, join the Facebook pages. But I did notice, because it was the hotter race, we were running at the end of July, those 20-mile sections were rough. To not see an aid station. And 2 of those 20-mile sections, there was no water. I think even in our film at one point, you can see me eating snow. That's why. I'm getting the snow in my body to cool me down, and really just needing some type of, and snow does not hydrate you. It was really just putting it in my mouth to get the dryness out of the way. But yeah, I probably could have attempted to carry more water, get, you know, more bottles. One of the things that I did, because Cocodona, when it started this year, there was I think it ended up being a pretty long section without water. So you don't see your crew for 38 miles. But there was an aid station like at mile 8, and then there was a drop water. I think they had dropped water twice in there. And it was very specific. Like you could only fill up one little flask. And it was hot. I mean, people were laying under trees, and you know, but it was nice having those places where they had dropped water. But what I did was, in addition to my pack, I got just this big fabric waist belt. I just got it on Amazon. It was like $8. All it was just this piece of fabric that had 2 giant pockets in it. I mean, it was super basic. There's no name brand on it or anything. But I was able to put 2 flasks into that. So I carried an extra liter of water. Once that liter was gone, I didn't have to carry that weight anymore. And the collapsible flask, I was able just to shove in my pack. So it was kind of nice. And I only did it for that section, knowing that I would need extra water. So that was one way to carry an extra liter of water, because it was hot. And I knew that the water that was dropped out there was rationed. So you had to be considerate of the people behind you and hope and trust that everyone was being considerate, right? When we got there was a lot of water. But yeah, so Tahoe 200, again, it was a new course. I don't know if that will change, but that seemed pretty consistent both at Bigfoot and Moab. The aid stations are a little bit further apart. And so, you definitely need to plan for that. Yeah. Any other crew stuff there? I know for pacers, you cannot get a pacer just wherever you want. So it starts at mile 60. Cocodona 250, you can start with a pacer at mile 70. Cocodona, you could change out a pacer every aid station all the way to the finish line. The race at Tahoe, very specific, where you could pick up a pacer and where you could drop them off. And again, that just has to do with parking, access, how many people are allowed to be in that certain area, really limiting the footprint. And again, it just has to do with the course. Moving on to Bigfoot, Eddie, you were not at Bigfoot, but I will say, and I highlighted this at the beginning, if you plan to crew this, plan to drive hundreds of miles in order to get to different stations. Now, what some people will do with their crew is they sit down and they're very thoughtful about the specific aid stations that crew will go to because of that. And then utilize the drop bags for everything. So just beef out your drop bags. Every drop bag have shoes, have socks, have a blister pack, have a first aid kit in there, have a beanie, gloves, like backups for everything, because you don't know when you're going to get into these aid stations. You might think you're getting an aid station at 5 p.m. and you might not get there until 3 a.m. And so utilizing the drop bags, I think, is very important. And there are several drop bag stations at Bigfoot, which was really nice. So Leo Fung knew that course like the back of his hand. I mean, Leo Fung is so brilliant. He didn't use Google Maps once. Yeah, that's crazy. And drove to every available aid station there was. He loved it. He enjoyed it. He also volunteered his time. That's the other thing too. You can volunteer at an aid station while you crew for people at the Destination Trails races. So Leo loves being a part of the community. He loved interacting with the other volunteers and the other runners. So while he was crewing me, he also gave his time, which was just so admirable. I thought that was awesome. really cool of him to do that. Some key points, just like I said, at Tahoe, there were some pretty long sections that you went through without seeing an aid station. Let's see. The beauty, my favorite part of the Bigfoot 200 course was definitely the first 40 miles. Stunning. I felt like I was running in Europe. It was incredible. I felt like that's also the fastest part of the course. I did not plan or mean to, or wasn't even aware that at one point I was first overall while running the first 40 miles of that course. It didn't last very long, but it made me giggle. There was a lot of downhill, a lot of flat, and I was running with Eliza for a while, and Eliza went on to get, I think, second place. Phenomenal runner, but we were just settled into great conversation. I didn't realize I was running up front. That was not the plan for Bigfoot, because I did Bigfoot just 17 days after Tahoe, after finishing Tahoe. That is not how the Triple Crown is usually mapped out. So usually Tahoe is in June, Bigfoot is in August, and then Moab is in October. So you do get some somewhat good time to recover. Doing 3 200s in 1 year, it doesn't matter if you're doing it in January, June, and December, is still a lot. It's a lot on the body. The first 40 miles of that race, beautiful. Absolutely loved it. Tons of spots to fill up your water bottle. I mean, water was rushing everywhere. So I really appreciated that. The terrain at Bigfoot, the scenery at Bigfoot is gorgeous. You are locked inside a forest a little bit more. I feel like Tahoe, you peek in and out, you kind of come in and out. So you get a little bit more of like those vista type views and overlooking the lake. There were times at Bigfoot, and I was moving pretty slow, where you just felt like you were in this never ending green tunnel, but the forest was so beautiful. But I do remember asking, like, when am I going to pop out of this? I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone, just going deeper and deeper. You really feel, I think of all the races, Bigfoot is the most remote.
Yeah.
And so if you want to go on an adventure into the outer known, Bigfoot is the race for you. It really does feel like you're just at the edge of the wilderness. And there's something exciting about that. There's something exhilarating about that. Yeah, that one was beautiful. I felt like the terrain, because you are up in the PNW, you definitely have a lot of sections that are soft. I feel like the ground is just softer. It's almost like carpet. A lot of moss.
And that one's a point to point, right?
Yes, it is. Bigfoot is a point to point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that one was beautiful, very remote. And I feel like if you are considering doing this with crew and pacers, you do need to let them know that it's a ton of driving. I also didn't feel like that for Leo, he would really have to go out of his way to get to a store. You want to make sure that you have a good cooler of food if you're going to crew a Bigfoot. Have enough resources in the car just in case you can't get somewhere or find a coffee house. I mean, it's a very different experience from Tahoe. The other thing was even like hotels are scarce. So both at the start line and the finish line. Like we drove an hour and a half to get to the start, and then we just decided to drive straight back to Portland right after the race because I was flying out the next day.
Yeah.
It just made sense that was also like an hour and a half.
That's rough.
It was, because we finished in the middle of the night. Moving on to Moab 240, which is the most recent, the freshest in our mind. We flew into Salt Lake City for this one.
Yep.
It was about a 3.5 hour drive to get to Moab from the Salt Lake City airport. Is there a closer airport? I think there is. I mean, I think Moab has an airport.
I think Moab does have an airport. It's like the size of this office.
Yeah, it's a little one. Moab 240, I loved that downtown area that we stayed. Lots of places to stay, lots of great food, great community, delicious coffee, burgers, you name it. It's a great experience for crew in the days leading up to the race. The race this year started at noon.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why they did that was so that runners would avoid the hottest part of the day in the most exposed section. Now, this was the first year, is really important for people to know too, that in the past, Moab was not a true 240-mile race. And this year, they wanted to make sure that we hit that 240 mark, which we absolutely did. And so they added, I believe it was either 13 or 15 miles and 4,000 feet of climbing to the race. So this is the first year that runners had a new edition of the course, because I think the course has pretty much always stayed the same in years past. I don't, sometimes there's small alterations, but this was a new course for us. Thoughts on the course as a whole? Beautiful. I loved it. One thing I really liked about it was the diversity in the terrain and just your views. Yeah. So we got to be inside a forest for sure. There are times that you're up in the aspens. I mean, towards the last like 50 miles, because it's in the fall, it's jaw-dropping beautiful. There's yellow and red leaves everywhere. I mean, and you run through trails where you're just with these trees lining the entire way. Just gorgeous. But then you're hitting sections where it's red rock all around you. I remember the Island Aid Station was one of my favorite ones, where we're just surrounded by these beautiful plateaus and gorgeous red rocks all around. I remember running that section with Sarah. But then you also have sections in this course where you can run very well and very fast if your legs are feeling good. And the way that I strategized running Moab was I was going to start racing the last 100 miles. And so at mile 120 is where I picked up Billy, and that was the start of a 27-mile road section that we ran the entire time. I think at some points we were running 10-minute pace, which does not sound fast for racing. But when you're 120, 130 miles into a race, I was very grateful to be moving so well. Yeah, so you get a really good variety here. Now, I had 4 pacers for this race. And as Eddie had noted earlier, it was pretty stressful getting those pacers to where they needed to go. So stressful, in fact, that I at one point had just had to tell Eddie and said, use Leo as best you can to figure out the driving thing, because I was so concerned about you. I just knew I just needed you. As long as you were there at every aid station, that was the most important thing, because you have my supplies, my gear. You're a great support to me, just your presence alone. But we started to realize, as from the time we checked in, we're like, wait, this is going to be kind of tricky. Getting 4 different pacers here, and they all drove in at their own different time, because we're not asking these people to stay for 5 days just for us, but they drove in at different times at their own cars. So you always had to pick them up at a spot where they were allowed to leave their car.
Right. Yeah, it was a little tricky just because this was the race that you had the most pacers. You had the most people supporting you. So, and it was one of the strictest in terms of parking and bodies and stuff like that. But yeah, so it took a little more logistics on my end to, make it happen. But it was good to have Leo and we worked it out. But yeah.
Now, as far as resources, scenery, getting to a grocery store, experience for you as a crew member, can you speak a little bit to that?
It was probably, in terms of like crewing to see the city, and it's probably my least favorite of them all.
So just the day before and the day after was the best.
Yeah, because you're
in the Moab.
in Moab. Yeah, exactly. But then once the race starts, there's a section where, this is actually probably good if someone's going to be doing this race, because Leo got a hotel in Monticello, Utah, and just a tiny, tiny town. And it was a place where you were running out towards, and it was like a good, like, I don't know, home base, because we saw you, I think, 2 or 3 different checkpoints, but we would go back to Monticello. It was like a 45-minute drive back to that little town. And that's where they had, it's such a small town, but they did have like a couple coffee shops that had, smoothie stuff or some things that we were able to get for you. But on the crew side of things, we spent a lot of time in that race in that city, and there's just not a lot going on in that city. It's pretty mellow. And so that part was, I didn't really get to see the course, I guess is what I'm saying.
I know, like the island aid station was my favorite. And I think you used to be able to go out to that one. And in my opinion, I remember being there and thinking Eddie would have loved to like hunker down right here, because that's when the solar eclipse was happening too.
Yeah.
And there was a ton of people out there. I mean, there's so many people, like people camping and just out there hiking, and a lot of open space. And so I just thought, oh man, I really wish that Eddie could have been out here. And I like I said, I think about that. I think about the experience for you. Like, you want it to be an adventure for the crew too, and you want them to experience, and you want to talk about oh my gosh, wasn't it so pretty when you got to this part. And so I think having to do a 45-minute drive back to a little city and wait to be, because you are not allowed to go into the aid station until I'm within 30 minutes of the aid station. So it's not even like, because the last time that I see you before the finish line, that area was gorgeous.
Which one was that one?
It was the last time I got into the car is where I came in, I had really bad breathing, and I left with Joe up the hill, the big climb.
Oh yeah.
And I wasn't, and do you remember that?
I do.
Like the aspens,
it was
the
pretty.
Yellow leaves. I mean, you're up in the mountain right there, and you're over 9,000 feet up at that point. But yeah, I think that is really good for when you're going to do one of these races and you're thinking of the experience for your crew. That's something to take into consideration. Now, do you feel like if you did not have to worry about pacers, would you have navigated the course differently? Because some people will have crew, but they won't have pacers. Would that have been a better experience for you? Do you feel like you would have had more time to go and explore and maybe go on a hike, or would that have been a better experience?
Not really. I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, because like I said, we were not stuck, but we were at Monticello for like 2 days. And there's just not much around that place unless you wanted to drive an hour to get out of it. But No, I don't think so. I think, it was, and I think part of it too was a bummer where a lot of those times where you came into certain aid stations that were seemingly like pretty parts of the course, it was night, so I'm like, I didn't even get to see
like Shea Mountain.
Yeah, so some of them, obviously that just depends on your runner when they're coming in based on what you get to see, but the ones that you did come in that were in the light, like one of them was that
the road
flattened section. I'm like, okay, great. Like, nothing to that one.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, like you said, the one when Joe took you to the finish line was pretty. And that was like in the morning, when the sun was coming up. That was a pretty one. But yeah, so I think, it was a good place to crew. It wasn't my favorite, but
yeah. So as a runner, I really loved that course.
Yeah.
And it played personally to a lot of my strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of, the physical things that I was feeling, I still felt like I was able to enjoy it. And I remember in the last 30 miles, Joe flipped around and he took like this 10-second video of me. He loved it because the trail was lined by all these beautiful aspens. They're all yellow. And he's like, you're gonna love this. And he told me, he's like, look behind you. And, I wasn't in a great place, but I remember thinking to myself how important that is when we are racing. Even if you're in a bad spot, look around and enjoy where you are and what you get to do. Gratitude goes a long way. Mm-hmm. And as we climbed at that mountain, he also then pointed off to his left and he's like, look at that. And there was like this lake up there. And I thought, oh, that is the coolest thing. I didn't know that was up there. And so I loved the diversity as a runner. Thought it was such a cool course. I really do like loop courses, and point-to-point courses are my favorite. And this was a loop course. So where you start, you finish, which is also nice because the start and finish was at an RV park. So if you have a Sprinter van, if you have an RV, that's also wonderful too. So if you're bringing up a family, and maybe you're not planning on taking the whole family to crew, the family has a lot to do. There's a lot to do in town. You can go hiking. If you stay at a hotel with a pool, I mean, there's definitely opportunities at Moab where if you're not gonna be crewing, that other people with you will definitely have an enjoyable time.
Yeah.
But to say which one is my favorite is really hard, because there's so many factors to go in to what is my favorite. I think if I had to choose one for somebody's first, if you're looking to do your first 200, I would definitely choose Cocodona, and that is primarily based on several things that just check off for me. One is if you're going to have crew and pacers, the overall experience is more enjoyable as far as just access goes, and what you get to see in all the different towns. I mean, you literally are going on a tour of Arizona, and I think that's the way that Jamil actually made this course. The way he created it, he just loves and is so in love with the land in those trails that he runs. He wanted to expose that to everyone, and so the way he connected this, and I had a conversation about it. It's so brilliant. What you did, because the experience for the runner is really getting this beautiful snapshot of a big chunk of Arizona, but also the crew is able to experience it in a cool way too, whether it's the beauty of it or just being able to get into a city, a brand new city, and experience the city. I also like that you could have countless pacers. I mean, how fun to know that every aid station, once you're allowed to have a pacer, you can keep changing those pacers out. They can hop in and out. They have access all throughout. And so that was a big factor for me. If you're a beginner, that is a great race to do. I think coming in close second would be Tahoe. And I'd say for a beginner, Tahoe is a great race to do. Again, it has to do with access. And I think for athletes, and this is really me speaking from a coach's perspective, athletes like to know that there's some type of structure and some type of control when they go into something that they don't know. And I think a big factor is if you're going to get out on these courses and train, I highly recommend always going with somebody. But the thing about Tahoe that was so great for me, I went out and trained on my own, was I was always close to town. I knew that if I was ever in trouble, I actually wasn't that far from the road. I wasn't that far from civilization. And so because this year was about learning these races and really trying to navigate them, when you feel like you have a little bit more support, that helps you. It's just, it's like having training wheels. And then I think, Bigfoot and Moab would come after those. So I would put Cocodona 250 and Tahoe 200 as great beginner races. Keep in mind the difference between Cocodona and Tahoe, the blaring ones, is the distance between in which you see the aid stations. But that just comes down to your planning. When you're aware of those things, then you know how to pack your bag and just what to expect. And then, of course, the coverage. All these races have spot trackers, so everyone back home can in real time see where you are. Vipa Racing will, of course, have a live chat room, live commentators going on the entire time that the race is going on. So if that is important to you, that is a difference between the Destination Trails and the Vipa racing organizations. And then I'd say the quality of the aid stations, medical, all of that, sleep aid stations, I think that Cocodona definitely takes the win on that as well. Cocodona being able to offer buildings that have signs on them that say quiet, only runners allowed, that's huge. I think that was really nice. And their aid stations are stocked out. I mean, everything that you can think of. Yeah, they did that very well. Now, one of the factors that go into pacing these as well, that goes into choosing one of these, is how you want to run it. See, I really think that what is so cool about the 200-mile races is that you can approach it with an adventure mindset. And because you get, long, you get 5-6 days to finish these things, you could go in and fast pack these. In fact, I think there was someone that did an experiment on it, and they actually finished pretty well. They didn't finish in the back. They were like in the middle, maybe upper middle. And they fast packed every day. They didn't run at all. And I think if you go in and you have that adventure mindset, hey, every day I'm going to do 50 miles, 45, 50 miles. I don't know what the exact mathematical breakdown is in correlation with the cutoff. I should probably get that right. I mean, you can do a quick calculation, and then you plan to stay in a hotel, at a couple of the cities along the way. You're planning to have a shower, to get some good food. I mean, you could do this with a friend and have an incredible time. And I think for all the races, you could really make an adventure out of all 4 of these races and have an experience that you want for yourself. And I think, I know on Destination Trails, they're very, straightforward about saying that this isn't a race. It's a journey, I think is what she says, or a journey or an adventure. So that's the best way to approach it. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to be put into several uncomfortable situations. And one of them that I'm going to highlight right now is sleep. I think this is the number one concern that people have. It's the top question that people have about how to go about strategy. Now, I'm going to talk more about this when we talk about training and executing a successful 200-mile race, which will be a later podcast. But I do want to tell you first and foremost, there is talk, and I've heard this on several podcasts and in conversation, that if you can do these, under 75 hours, under 70 hours, somewhere in there between 70, 75 hours and under, that you can do them on very little sleep to no sleep. If you're looking at beyond that, that's when the sleep deprivation really sets in and can cause some issues as far as you being disillusioned, the hallucinations. For Tahoe, that was the worst one for me. And I know a big part of it was because I was sick and I was completely void of calories. So I think that's why I had such a rough time with that. So I think that if you are well fueled, if you're really taking care of your body and you're just moving at the clip that you want to go each day, you've planned to do a certain amount of miles, you're not looking to do it, in a blazing fast time, I don't think that you'll struggle as much because you'll be able to sleep. I know some people are like, no, every 24 hours, I'm going to sleep 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great strategy. So it is going to come with trial and error because everyone's sleep is different. Everyone needs a different amount of sleep. But if you are not looking to race these and get on the podium, or you're not trying to reach a certain time, you do have a little bit more freedom to be very intentional about getting a good chunk of sleep each day. But we've seen people even racing at the top who are like, dude, I'm going to sleep for 3 hours. And then that's the game changer that they need, because then they can move faster at the end. Mm-hmm. They have more energy. They're more aware. So I don't think I have it down right perfectly. Again, I'll talk about this more in a later podcast. I did a different sleep strategy every single race. So you name it, I did it. Cocodona was probably where I took the longest. I was more calculated at Cocodona. I knew when I was going to sleep. Yep. Bigfoot was just, I think, probably the worst performance for me, as far as like, I went into that race very tired already. And so I had, I think the first time I slept was like at mile 60, and it was like 2.5, 3 hours that I slept. But I was like projectile vomiting and like so out of it. And then there was a lot of log 5-minute naps. Moab was the first time I did dirt naps. I had never done that at other times. Tahoe, I just was never able to calm down my system. So I actually didn't really sleep much at all. Yeah. Even in the beginning, you can see in that film, I stayed in that aid station for 2 or 3 hours. I don't think I slept more than 8 minutes. Yeah. I couldn't fall asleep. I laid there, but I didn't. I didn't fall asleep. So yeah, we'll tackle the sleep stuff in a later podcast. But overall, we hope today that we have given you a good insight, good snapshot into each of these courses. Again, just kind of circling back, Cocodona 250 starts in Phoenix, ends in Flagstaff, Arizona. Tahoe 200, of course, is around Lake Tahoe in Northern California. Bigfoot 200 is in the PNW up in Washington, but only about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive from Portland Airport in Oregon. And then you have Moab 240, which is about a 3.5 hour drive from Salt Lake City. That is in Utah. And those races took place in May, July, August, and October. The Grand Slam of 200s is a newly coined challenge. And basically that came off of doing the Triple Crown and adding Cocodona 250 to it for the Grand Slam of 200s. Now, in the coming years, there's going to be a lot more 200s. So I think people will just be coming up with their own Grand Slams and Triple Crowns, which I highly encourage that you do. It's kind of fun to see that you can run and cover all of this terrain in so many beautiful parts of the country. I know there's a new one called the Divide 200. I think we even got invited to go do that one up in Canada, right? Didn't you talk to somebody up there?
No, I talked to the Oregon one.
Oh, Oregon.
Yeah.
The Oregon 200. Yeah, Oregon 200 is another one. That one's in August. But then there's one up in Canada. Yeah. It's either Canada 200 Divide or Divide 200 or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, there's more popping up. It's super exciting. And I loved them. I'm very grateful that I spent this year doing it. I think it was just a wonderful part of my career that I'll look back on and just be so proud of, because for many, many years I said I would never do a 200. And then I started 2023 and say, you know what? I'm going to be a student of the 200. I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm going to do my best each race and learn something new. And I'll tell you what, the experiences and the memories that I made will be the best part. You spend so many days, so many hours out there with your crew and pacers. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you what, every person that supported me, they are my friends. Mm-hmm. And I love them so much, so appreciative for all of them, everyone that supported me in this. And I think if you have a chance to bring people along, I highly recommend that. Yeah. I highly recommend, simply because being able to experience these things with someone that you love is, it just makes it all the better. The other thing that I want to encourage too, because some people will say, well, I just don't know who to ask or where to go, or I can never find crew and pacers. The Facebook pages, you can. ask in advance. Sometimes it might take a few weeks or maybe even a month to find somebody. But if you get in those Facebook race pages, you can usually find people. I mean, there's people in there that want to crew and pace because they potentially want to do the race. So do a social post, ask around in other running communities. If you can assemble a crew and pacers, it really does make the experience so much better. And I feel like I'm missing something in all of these. Am I missing anything, Ed, or any big question that came in outside of the gear and the training, all that? I promise I will get to that. But this is really breaking down the races and really trying to help people choose one if they want to do them and really understand the differences between them.
Yeah, I think you highlighted all of them pretty well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing I do want to say is that my gear for every race was pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. Even though I ran at different times of year and the terrains were different, mm-hmm. I'd say for the most part, almost all of them had pretty buffed out trails. Mm-hmm. The most technical and rugged was probably Bigfoot 200. Mm-hmm. I feel like there had to be at least 100 downed trees in the forest for Bigfoot 200. After I finished, I still have scars on my legs from that. I have a lot of scrapes, scratches, and bruises from going over and under massive redwood trees that were just down. And then you do get a lot of like gravel and like volcanic scree. You absolutely need 100% to wear gaiters for Bigfoot 200. It was suggested for Tahoe 200. I did wear them there. I think I wore them almost every single race. I wore gaiters.
I think you did, yeah.
I don't feel like I really needed them for Tahoe looking back, but because it's granite dust, I think that was one of the things that people are saying. When that gets into your socks and shoes, it just does not feel good. But I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had gaiters here.
Yeah.
Having them at Moab was nice because of kind of same thing. When you're running in the desert, when you're running on dust and dirt for so long, you do want to keep that out of your shoes. So I would just say overall, err on the side of just getting gaiters. They are not my favorite thing. I don't like the way they look, and that sounds so superficial. But I am grateful that I had them, and I would highly recommend them. The sun hat, I will touch on this. I got asked about this constantly.
You always get asked about that.
I know.
The sun hat.
The sun hat was used not just because of the sun. When you are running in places like this, in all 4 races, you are exposed to a lot of dust, a lot of different weather changes. And that was true on all 4 of them. So I was putting on a jacket, gloves, and a beanie at every single race. Yep. I was putting on at some point pants. Even when we were running like in the desert, dude, it gets cold at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. And so the hat was one. Sometimes it did provide just protection from the sun, but wind is a very important factor that is often overlooked. And wind, as it comes into your face, through your nose, through your eyes, into your mouth, it can dehydrate you very fast, even if it's nice and cool out. And so I use that to protect myself from getting dehydrated too fast. But also, here's the thing. A lot of people finish these races with a really bad dust cough and very chapped lips, chapped noses. So that is where that hat came in handy. My face did pretty well in comparison to a lot of people that I saw out there that had blistered lips, very scratchy throats, chapped noses, and chapped, just all around the mouth. It really is just exposure. I mean, it isn't because they weren't putting on chapstick and sunscreen. It's the elements as a whole that you need to cover yourself up from. So that is what the sun hat was for. Now, again, we'll talk more about gear and racing and training in the next 200-mile podcast. But this was really about giving you exposure to what it's like for crew, what it's like for pacers. And I felt like overall for pacers, if you're going to get pacers for destination trail races, they need to be able to run far. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was any section that was under 15 miles.
Yeah, I think you're right.
A lot of 20 and 30 mile sections. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
With Sarah, when I picked up Sarah, she had to run almost 50 miles
I was gonna say,
right
it was like
away.
40, yeah,
It was
you're right.
47.
Yeah, 47.
And so there was no place for her to jump out.
Mm-hmm.
There was no place for her. I mean, you're putting other people at risk and you know, the park at risk if they have to go out and find a pacer or if someone's left behind. So they do have rules in the destination trails. If your pacer gets sick, if they get injured, you have to stay with that pacer and get them to an aid station. It's funny because you look at races like Western States and how often pacers are dropped on that course. I mean, it's incredible where a pacer will come into an aid station all by themselves with their head down and they're like, yeah, I got dropped by my runner. You may not do that. No. With the destination trails races. So a lot of that is about safety. So you do need to keep that in mind. Because there were a couple times throughout the years I was looking at pacers and I was like, oh, I'll just have so-and-so and like pace me. And it would be a friend, but then I realized I'm like, this person has never run trails. This person has never done a trail race. And they could actually be a liability if they don't understand this terrain or just how trails run. If they twist an ankle or they're not able to keep up, like this could be a huge problem for me.
Yeah.
The pacers are very, very crucial into help keeping you on course. Because you go off course, you need to go back to where you went off course, redo that run, and then continue on. Mm-hmm. So I'd say pick someone that is okay with being out there for a long time with you. Obviously, you're not ripping off like 7-minute pace out there, you know, so you just want someone that's encouraging, is going to keep you on course and can go, you know, pretty far. So
yeah,
good stuff.
Good stuff.
Overall, Eddie, your experience as a crew chief, is there anything else that you would like to convey, encourage, or remind?
Man, I don't think so.
No?
I don't. I think...
Did you have a good time? Would you do it
did.
Again?
That
or is that too soon?
Is too soon.
Too soon?
Way too soon.
Way too soon.
I did have fun. I did enjoy myself and got to see some cool cities and meet some cool people, but it is too soon to say whether I would do it again or not.
Well, I think we added up the time away. That was something you and I talked about. This is the most time away we've spent from our kids together.
Yeah,
ever
I think
since
that's
having
part
kids.
of it. Yeah, I think that's part of it.
Yeah, we missed our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it came out to 15 days this year.
Yeah.
That you and I collectively spent away from it at the same time.
Yeah.
And what was it like before we left for Moab? I remember both the kids were kind of giving us this look, like, seriously?
Again? Yeah.
Yeah.
They were.
And our kids are 15 and 17. And I remember us going to the airport. I'm like, I'm kind of happy that like our kids aren't, yay, they're gone, let's throw a party at the house.
Yeah.
They were genuinely like, really? You're leaving again? When are you going to be back? You know, and I'm grateful we had family that came over to stay with them. That was important for us too, and something people have to consider. If you don't have family to stay with your kids, it's, you know, that becomes, you know, kind of rough too. So
True.
Thankfully we have a lot of local family that helped out with that. But yeah, being away from both of our kids for 15 days this year, it's usually like either I'm just gone or just you're gone. There's always a parent that's with our kids. So
yeah, that part was tough, but yeah, I think it was definitely a fun experience. 2023, 200.
That one goes
races.
down in the books, and I'll tell you what, Eddie, I'm very grateful and forever grateful that you were there, because you made every race experience for me so much better. You made it seem like I could achieve it, because what I experienced out there was rough.
Yeah.
But looking back now that it's done, I'm very happy that I set out on the journey and that I completed what I said that I was going to do, no matter the circumstance. So, and I think that's going to be the closing word that I give to our listeners today. This is a very informational podcast today.
Yes.
But one of the things that I just want to encourage you, that when you make a big goal for yourself, don't be afraid of making it because you don't know how it's going to turn out. Be excited about the mystery and the wonder that's ahead of you, but commit on how you want to operate. Commit on how you want to achieve that goal and work at it with your whole heart. I know for me, I committed 110% to that training. I gave 110% of myself every single race, and it did not ensure a smooth path. It was not easy by any means. There was a lot of rough moments throughout the Grand Slam series. But now as I sit here today, healed, having completed it, having won the Grand Slam and the Triple Crown in Moab and gotten on the podium at Tahoe 200, I'm happy that I did what I did. And I think if anything, I will carry that now that I know what I'm capable of enduring as I look forward to the future. And that, my friend, is what is so exciting when you choose to dream a new dream, when you choose to work toward another goal, is it doesn't have to be about perfectly executing the goal. It's about what you learn, how you grow, what you show yourself along the way. The experiences that you have, I promise you're going to come out stronger than when you started, regardless of whether or not the path was smooth or rocky. You just keep going, keep reaching toward that goal. And I'll tell you what, Eddie and I will be rooting for you every step of the way. So let's go ahead and close right there.
Yes, let's close it up.
Keep choosing
strong. Until next time.
Until next time, keep choosing strong in all that you do.